but yeah, it starts on the saying we failed miserably. So keep it an intrigue. Anyway, everybody loved our designer actually, and this is how the whole Humbleteam thing actually started. And since then, we've done many amazing projects like designing fintech application and applications that got plenty of money, or many companies from Y Combinator, 500 startups, Seedcamp, Seedstar, Techstar came to us, and actually like other cool startups. Whatever. Let's get to other cases. Even engineers from NASA came to us to design a system to kind of like manage cargo on International Space Station. So actually, being extremely bad at sales and marketing, it kind of like paid off. So in total, we work on more than 100 projects with a lot of investment rounds they managed to secure, and that's my build up. And now it's gonna be the act, because among these 100 projects we work on, there are dozens of different apps we've taken from a sketch on a napkin stage to full-scale apps with hundreds of thousands of users. And among them, there are two main topics every company had struggles to care of. The first one is time to market, and second one is gathering users' feedback. And these both things are extremely important, specifically during this recession we experience right now, because getting new investments gonna be more and more complex, right? So everybody has a limited runway right now, and if you have limited runway, you need to release useful features on the first try, because usually for many companies there are going to be not that much space for kind of like trial and error approach, right? So today we will try to cover these two things. How in some cases we managed to reduce time to market by nearly 50%, in many cases nearly 30%, and how to start getting users' feedback within hours and not days or weeks, how it typically happens in many startups. Yeah, and if you have time for like Q&A session, we can go deeper into cases or questions you have. So here's the topic number one, as I said, how we set up our process to cut time to market. And I hope that you will be able to use it on your projects then, because the system is pretty simple. So in my humble opinion, a good release cycle, this is something up to 3 weeks, including implementation. And let's first of all understand why, for instance, like 3 weeks or not 5 or not 2. Basically, 3 weeks mean that within a year, you can have up to 18 experiments, right? And imagine if you spend 4 weeks from an idea to release, and in such a case, you lose almost 30% of experiments, right? Because if you spend a month, you have only 13 launches annually. It's like 12 versus 18, right? It sounds a little bit scary, because such a pace will be thoroughly bad for investors and your product team. And if you have releases every 5 weeks, it's getting completely disastrous, because you have only 10 experiments a year, right? There are 50 weeks within 1 year. So you have only 10 opportunities to share your product, to get certain feedback, to improve your business KPIs, and 10 tries within a year. It's not that much, right? So this is our conclusion, that we would like to stick to an idea that we will try to test any product hypothesis in 3 weeks, including the implementation. And now I'm gonna get to the particular example from our experience to see how design process should look like to meet this deadline of just 3 weeks, right? 20 days. So that's the case number one. Imagine a neobank application, like Revolut and 26, there are many of them. They all do pretty much the same thing. They have pretty standard features. It could be checking account, debit card, saving account, transfers, like everybody has pretty much the same banking application. So right now, being a product manager or like co-founder of a company, you want to add a new feature to help people save money on their subscriptions. Let me explain how it works. Imagine a user, and such a user has tens of subscriptions, and usually many of them live from paycheck to paycheck. So if you being a user have no money right now, but there is a Netflix subscription charging you, like Spotify, any other subscription, right? You usually get a fee. And imagine multiple subscriptions charging you at the same time, and it basically leads to pretty significant fees, right? If 10 subscriptions charge you at the same time with you having exactly $0 in your account, it's gonna lead to 10 different fees, right? And it's even scarier because you already have no money in your pocket, right? So there is definitely like a pain point to address. And users in our application, they had a lot of late overdraft fees, and they didn't seem really happy about it. So to solve this issue, we want to offer a new product feature to them. It's called line of credit for our users. Basically, it's simply $50-$60 to cover those subscriptions, but no interest, right? So let's plan how we will release such a feature for our application. Like all startup people will be like, oh, let's put an MVP for this, not a full-scale feature, but just an MVP. So let's imagine what's going to be an MVP for a fintech application if you want to add a line of credit for offering like $50-$100 our users to cover these subscriptions. Actually, speaking of MVP, number of these screens we need to design and develop to launch such an MVP, it's gonna be pretty significant, right? You don't need to read it all. It just to give you an understanding of amount of work needed to cover such a feature, right? Because there are going to be, first of all, setup. We need to onboard users into our application, right? We need to recognize subscriptions in our transactions. We need to cover edge cases like subscription cannot be edit subscription when something changes, like you change the plan in your Netflix from like single account to family account. You need to somehow reflect it in the application, right? And then when people use the feature, they're going to be 10 more screens, right? Like screen, here are my subscriptions to pay, or you have empty states, overdue payments, pay these subscriptions and not pay these subscriptions, credit line setup, credit line repayment, collection. There are many additional things which are kind of like obligatory to do anyway. And it all looks like a lot of work, actually, much more than 3 weeks, right? So what we're gonna do? In such a case, we usually try to get back to the assumption we want to test, right? What are the risks? Our main risks is that, first of all, people will not add subscriptions at all, right? So we will have no subscriptions to offer them a credit line. Or a second risk could be that onboarding will be not really convincing enough to convert users, and people will not sign up for a feature. We will release it, and then there are gonna be like exactly 0 users, right? Or additional risk is that people will convert, so like add subscriptions, but will use the feature, but that will have like 0 effect on our retention rate, right? So feature works, there are users, but retention doesn't go up. It means that by adding a new feature, we didn't really improve any of our business KPIs, right? So there is no sake of doing that. And additional risk could be, for instance, that people will not pay the debt back. They will get these credit lines, right? Sign up for a credit line. but they will not get money back. And it means like a huge collection process, for instance. So there are many risks we have in our feature, right? And that's actually where the main point of our design process comes, because the first thing we try to do is prioritizing those risks to solve only the most important ones first. To me, it seems like the number 3 here is the most important risk we have, because imagine if we have no retention increase at all, then it doesn't really matter if people have or have not subscriptions, right? If they have or do not have late fees. If we do not improve our main business KPI, then it means that feature is not really relevant. So let's then focus on testing these main risks only, because if we fail here, the rest simply doesn't really matter. And if retention goes up, then we will solve somehow other risks, right? Because there will be, let's say, minor. So let's then tweak our plan to test our retention assumption. So this is how it's gonna look like. First of all, let's select people living from paycheck to paycheck, and they are more likely to use our feature, and we don't need extensive onboarding to convince them, right? So we are already kind of like narrowing down the scope. Also, we can manually check their transactions and add subscriptions manually on users' behalf, right? And maybe we don't need any interface to edit or change subscriptions, since we can do it manually as well, right? It could be a super cheap workforce, like a, I don't know, student freelancer who will check database of our users and their payments, and such a person will manually mark subscriptions. It's going to be like an easy peasy thing for such an employee to do, like within 1-2 working days. So by doing this, we are already like 50% done with our scope, just by hiring a student who will do a lot of manual work. And the core idea when we want to release a new feature is to kind of like understand what are our risks, pick the most important one, and test only this single thing. So that's kind of like a forged process we have to test new hypotheses. Usually the first step when you come up with a feature is to determine the value proposition you're trying to test. Like, we want to test if adding a line of credit for paying subscriptions will increase retention in our application. And then as a second point, you need to identify all these risks in your assumptions. And typical risks can include, first of all, users not recognizing the product value. For instance, like, I don't know, you have added a crypto trading option to your product, while the majority of your users are already committed to services like Coinbase or Revolut. So you add a feature, but there is no value in it for your user base. Second one is that it could be really hard to acquire users for this new thing you're working on. Like, imagine you created an application that allows you to find a medical professional in Europe, right? And then it turns out that most major European cities have one of their own. They know their local markets, right? They know doctors, they know it very, very well, and you're in direct competition with them. So it's going to be super hard for you to get those people on board, right? It could be hard to make money out of this new feature, right? Meaning that, like, yes, product is being used, but your profit and loss statement is still in red. So that's like an additional risk you should take into account as well. The last thing is that it could be really like hard to execute and scale up the feature, right? Let's say you have an application that offers help with like moving, right? But as soon as you reach 100 requests, the city is suddenly like out of van drivers with no possibility to recruit more in time. And it's going to be impossible for you to scale up to execute it on a greater scale, right? So here are our risks, right? We already kind of like went through that, so I guess it's pretty much understandable. And now we have reached the most important part, right? We have our assumption, we have our risks, and now we need to pick the one risk that you're most likely to face. So if you want to read more about this, like testing hypothesis this way, I definitely recommend an amazing article from the Maven's CEO on the firstround.com, or like a lot of pretty extensive materials for testing out the hypothesis. So yeah, I guess you can go deeper into more details there. And on my end, I have another example from a different industry. And it's kind of like a super extreme one, actually, because in comparison to our initial plan, we've cut down like 90% of time dedicated for this feature. Yeah, let me see if we have time for that. Yeah, that should be fine. We have 20 minutes left. So yeah, we'll try to wrap it up in 15 and 20 minutes. So the second example, it's not a fintech application, but it's still representative, let's say. This is a project this is a mobile application for artists. And what it does, it's an application that helps artists have their artworks in one place. Like you can imagine a Google Drive for artists where they can store everything they have and keep everything there. What kind of problems it solves? If you're a painter, you usually have materials for arts all over the place, right? When somebody asks you or like wants to buy your painting, you send a photo from Dropbox, right? You send a description using email, then buyer asks you for additional pictures and you send them using WhatsApp. It's a chaos, like total. And the Marcel application solved this issue by just becoming a single source of truth where you can upload all the photos, prices, artwork sizes, basically all metadata you have, and you can use it from there. So it's kind of like a single source of truth for your art business. So like somebody asks you, do you have any artworks for my living room below $1,000 and smaller than 2 square meters? Because like I'm living in a relatively small flat. Then boom, you can just send them everything in one single email or export everything in one single WhatsApp message. You have like no hassle. You don't need to pull all the strings from different platforms. But still, there was a problem because after launch, we started to have a lot of users. Actually, we had tens of thousands of users, but we didn't really have any top tier professionals there, like at all. Our main audience, like bulk part of the audience, was hobby painters who sell paintings as a side gig. We've been doing many usability interviews with users, and a lot of them were saying like, oh yeah, I'm making like money out of my business, $2,000 like annually. So these people, they were not like super professional artists, right? They were selling a couple of artworks in a year. So we wanted to attract professional artists though, because real professionals with like 30 years of experience and some artworks for $10,000 or $20,000, because they will be super valuable for our application, right? They can invite other friends, they can invite art buyers, they have like social impact. But for us, it was almost impossible to get them into our application. And the reason is super simple, because if they want to upload everything they have into a mobile application, it means uploading a lot of things. Imagine you've been drawing pictures for the last 20, 30 years. So for you, it's going to be an upload process for hundreds of photos, right? You need to fill in hundreds of input fields, and your inventory is huge. You have many artworks. So when you see a banner on a Facebook, imagine you're like professional artist, and you see our social media marketing things like, hey, sign up for Marcel and put your inventory in one place. the onboarding process for you gonna be a huge bummer, because you click on this banner, right? And you need to spend maybe like the whole week typing in metadata in the application, uploading photos, doing all these things to just start using an application. So here is our situation. We think that our application will benefit from professional artists, right? They can invite other artists, they can invite, art buyers, they can promote our application. They're kind of like thought leaders in the industry. So if they use something, everybody else usually starts using that as well. But such people, they will not spend their precious time uploading everything they have in the application they see for the first time in their life. So in such a situation, then what shall we do? Kind of like an obvious thing is that we need to optimize the onboarding process for people with hundreds of artworks, right? Like by saying optimize, I mean, bulk upload things, create a way to like automatically sync up your Dropbox and Google Drive with Marcel. And design and development for such a thing, typically it will take like a month minimum, right? Which is kind of like against our policy to release any feature in 15 days or less, trying to wrap it up in these 3 weeks, right? And not longer. So let's actually get back to the assumption we want to test. This is what our MVP must check. We need to check if top-class artists will help us get on board other people, right? We don't want to test if they can go through the onboarding process or if they will manage to upload 200 artworks, right? We don't want to test these details. We want to test a high-level risk assumption that if pro artists will retain in the application and recommend us to many other folks they know. That's kind of like the main thing, right? Or maybe they will not. So that's the main thing to test for us. And we kind of like bended the whole design process into something different. We were thinking that what if we reach out to professional artists, we ask them to send all their Dropbox links, Google Drive folders, spreadsheets with sizes, Word documents with prices, and we will create their account in the application and upload everything on their behalf, right? Because it's going to be like a magic for you. Imagine you're an artist, you have all your materials all over the place, here and there, struggling to even tell the price for your artwork because you simply like forgot it. And then just you have your whole inventory sorted, systemized in one application. Everything you need is to just kind of like basically log in with your email and password, like QWERTY, ABCD, something which you can, of course, change later. So like you see, to test the idea, you just need to hire somebody for 1 month to transfer a bunch of JPEGs and text into the application. We don't need to create even a single additional screen in our application. It takes 0 development time. You don't need to create any additional mockups in Figma. Like design team needs to create a bunch of emails which you can send to those artists, right? So the process is going to be super simple. So using our scheme, it will be something like this. The value proposition we are trying to test is we want to test if professional artists will retain in our application. And then we try to identify the risks in our assumptions. I mentioned them already, right? Like artists will abandon app. They will not upload artworks. They will upload 50% of their artworks. They will not pay, etc., etc., etc. But we need to pick the most probable risk only and create a flow to test it. And that's it. So that's kind of like the method we use at Humbleteam. And the second quick topic I'd like to cover today is how we started collecting users' feedback super fast in comparison to many other startups from accelerators. How usual interviews and researches with users usually like look like. you typically find people from your target audience, right? You send them email asking to join a quick call, a quick Zoom call, like, Google Meet, anything like that. And usually for some incentive, like, offering, typical case, offering an Amazon gift card for certain amount of money. And then you spend 30 minutes for each interview at least, right? And there is also some gaps in between. Usually you don't have back-to-back Zoom calls with those people because they're not that much flexible. And that's how the whole like user testing process looks like. But the thing we started to do is a little bit easier than spending the whole working day on these Zoom calls. Our kind of like an internal secret is to retain users who are willing to actually talk to you, get on calls, chat with you, and easy up the communication. Kind of like the first rule of thumb, messengers work much better than emails, because people associate emails with work and hate to deal with them outside working hours, right? And people are not still used to emails if they are not from like IT sphere. If you try to set up usability testing sessions with doctors, for instance, or auto mechanics, it's gonna be a huge problem to kind of like reach out to them using emails and yeah, get them on a Zoom call. But everybody uses WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp is lightweight, it's super fast. It creates kind of like a friendlier way of communication. And if you're asking if people really like to chat with designers using WhatsApp, you will be actually amazed how much, because like people don't read messages in WhatsApp or like in Telegram and Facebook Messenger, basically messages from me as a designer, as anything annoying. But they actually treat it as kind of like an opportunity to influence the product they use, and those people want to be a part of this journey. So text messages are super fast. You can take a screenshot of your designs in Figma, right? Send them over to those people and get feedback from customers like within an hour or so. Like it's as simple as that. That's an actual screenshot from my WhatsApp, right? You can add a quick mockup of the put a quick mockup of the feature and check with 10, 20 people. And if you're getting any like negative feedback at this point, it doesn't really make sense to get on Zoom calls with them, because it's going to be only worse, right? So it's a good way to kind of like do the first check for certain things. Kind of like a bonus point for this WhatsApp thing is that if you're a B2C product, you can even use Discord instead of messengers, because a lot of people use it instead of like Viber, WhatsApp. But you need to be aware that like older people, vice versa, they don't tend to use Discord on a daily basis. And another thing is to be like, let's say, be a little bit cautious about your target audience, because contacts you gather in WhatsApp, they usually do not represent 100% of your users, right? So it's not a bulletproof check, but it's still at least something, because if your WhatsApp contacts do not understand the feature you're trying to show them, then it's already a bad sign that like nobody else will understand either, and you need to definitely fix something. That's pretty much what I wanted to share today. And yeah, I guess we will share the deck after the meeting, and then going to be a recording. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any sort of questions, there's a chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask me certain things. Any questions? Welcome.
Thank you, Sergey. Really, it's been really interesting, this talk. Yeah, the recording and the presentation will be shared tomorrow. If you have any questions, this is the time. So don't be shy, feel free to unmute yourself or to write it on the chat. If there are no questions, this is the contact of Sergey, so I'm sure that at some point he will be able to answer.
Yeah, I'm pretty much online throughout the day on Twitter, so you can definitely hit me up there. And yeah, if you have any design related questions, I will be happy to help. Sorry, I'm looking at my second display. That's why probably it seems a little bit weird, but yeah, that's.
I have a question about this last thing that you explained about the WhatsApp, because I used to work as a product analyst and I spent many hours like doing interviews with users, etc. And you said that when you want to launch a new one, you just take the mockup and you send it to all the users, to 10, 20 users. And if you receive a no, then you don't build it anymore. Or you just, but that's maybe too extreme. No, maybe you get a hater.
Well, yeah, it's differently. That's what I'm saying. Like these people on WhatsApp, it's differently not like 100% of your audience. And if many of them hate a feature or think that it's not really necessary, these are just additional insights you should take care of, right? If 15 out of 15 people on WhatsApp saying that they don't really see any value behind this screen, it means that there could be certain things you can improve, right? So it's kind of like it rings a bell that something could go wrong. And if you know, vice versa situation, if 15 out of 15 people saying that, oh yeah, release it as soon as possible, it could be an indicator that you need to prioritize this feature, right? So it's kind of like a good first indicator. It's not 100% representative. But on the other hand, if everybody says that it's a bullshit, then it means that it could be.
Nice. No. Okay. Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. It reminds me to Lean Startup, the book of co-creating.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a lean approach for usability testing sessions. You like to hear that it doesn't make any sense. You don't need to have like 3 days of Zoom calls, because I've seen many usability testing sessions that it could last, you know, 10 minutes just because at the very beginning user says you, oh, I need something completely different, and those back-to-back calls are kind of like they become like useless, because you start to get a lot of repetitive feedback that something is not really needed, or maybe like competitor does it better and everybody uses a competitor. Right. So yeah, it's a tough question how to do proper usability testing sessions. Tough.
Yeah, and usability sessions are also tough by themselves. I have another question for the first case. So there was a point that you had to choose which screens to create when you had to add this new feature of yeah. So I didn't get the logics of how do you choose the main ones? How do you reduce it this much?
So yeah, we first of all we've put together a list for screens that are needed to this new feature to kind of like offer this line of credit, right, for our users. So we were thinking of a flow like, I'm a user, I open the application, I see a certain onboarding that this app offers line of credit. I sign up for it. I mark my subscriptions, like here's my Netflix for $10, here's my Spotify for $5, and so on and so on. And at the end of month, application checks if I have like $0 on my account and there is like a Netflix subscription coming up. It means that I will be I will need is $10 additional on my account, right? But in reality, it turned out that you can do a lot of these things on a manual basis, right? Basically, you can scratch out all these screens and just hire, I don't know, like a student who will go into users database, check, filter out people with like almost no money on their bank accounts, filter out people who have Netflix turned on, right? And you can just manually add their subscriptions on the user's behalf, right? So basically, you don't need onboarding, you don't need disconnect, edit, all these things. And you can just keep these main screens in the application that like, hey, Sergey, here's your Netflix. We mark that. We know that you ran out of money and you will need this additional $15 to avoid fee. And we took care of it. If you click this button, you will be signed up for a line of credit for this subscription, right? So out of 20 screens, there remained only like half of them which reduced the time to market at the end.
Nice. And now I get it. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. Okay. If there are any other questions, if not, I think we can end the session here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, recording stopped. Yeah, thank you very much for coming up. As I said, any questions, hit me up on Twitter. I guess that's gonna be the fastest way to reach out. Yeah, I'm not a guy who checks LinkedIn that often. And yeah, have a good yeah, it's Tuesday, right? So have a good Tuesday.